All right. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm Andrew King, editor-in-chief of Canadian Musician. Joining us for Indie Success, No Label Required, is Tyler Tasson, executive director of Endemic Music Marketing. Now, before founding Endemic, Tyler had worked as an executive with a couple of well-known record labels. First, Anthem SRO Entertainment, where she led marketing projects for the likes of Rush, The Tea Party, Big Wreck, list of others. And then after that, she was promoted when Olay bought out Anthem. She became the manager of label services for Olay, working again with Rush, superstar Haley Reinhart, George Canyon. But then started Endemic Music Marketing, where she's now basically working with a diverse and long list of clients, some very well-known ones, including the Good Lovelies, for whom her work was nominated for a SEMA Award that they'll be presenting in June. Go Tyler. But basically, yeah, she's helping artists take careers into their own hands and helping them to access services either that she provides or that she helps them enlist through other service providers. Services that are typically offered by a record label, where it's like an a la carte, pay for the service and then go on. You're not forfeiting a percentage of your earnings in the back end like you are in record deals. And yes, empowerment, take your career into your own hands. That's enough of me. Tyler, thanks a ton for joining us. And I guess before we jump in here, what's been keeping you and the Endemic team busy of late?
Yeah, thanks for having me. We've been super busy with Good Lovely still, actually. We've been able to keep them on as clients for the past 2 years, which is amazing. And I've been working with a fabulous artist named Isque as well. And she just kicked off her first single off of her upcoming album, and she did a big show at Mod Club. And yeah, there's been a couple of really cool projects coming down the pipeline.
Oh, co-sign on Isque, by the way. We've had her on the podcast and stuff. If you're not familiar, check her out.
Yeah, she's amazing. Really, really cool artist and really cool branding too. That's going to be coming down the pipeline with her too.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah, maybe we'll get some actual case studies out of this. But a quick overview of where we're going tonight. We're going to start off getting the goods on basically your profile and brand, kind of the macro level, how you are presenting yourself as an artist or band to the world digitally in real life. Going to talk about some ways that you can be critical about your own profile, ways that you can help to fine tune and enhance it on your own or with help. After that, we're going to talk about then kind of moving into the public sphere and finding your audience and then kind of fine tuning your demographic, going after the right fans, the people that are going to bring the most value to you for engagement, I guess, maximizing your return on investment when it comes to finding and capturing and keeping your audience. Then we're going to talk about campaigns. I guess in a lot of cases, the initiatives that you're rolling out with a marketing plan are going to have to do with a specific event, whether that's an album or single release. It could be as small as maybe a single high-profile show or maybe a charity initiative that you're launching. But in each case, we're going to talk about different kinds of campaigns, some of the things you need to consider, the importance of goal setting. And then at the end, or not at the end, but our last component will be, yeah, no label required. What are some of those services that a record label is offering to its signees that are helping propel their careers forward? How can you use that model, harness some of those services without any of the drawbacks? And that's what you came here for, so we'll save that for the closer. Here we go. Your profile and brand. So I've just got a few bullet points as to the different things that entails. But Tyler, yeah, maybe give us a start here. Maybe we can talk in the context of if a new client came to you and maybe had a couple releases under their belt, played some regional shows, but are ready to roll something out, maybe a new record, and they come to you saying, we need your help. Can you walk us through a bit about your starting point and maybe check off some of these items here in terms of what comprises a band or artist's overall profile / brand?
Yeah, for sure. And so when a client comes to me initially, what we'll do is kind of go through an asset inventory, is what I like to call it, which is essentially this, looking to see what we have at hand, say for the example of a new album coming out. Do they have a logo? Do they have the album artwork finished already? Is there single artwork? How many singles are going to be coming down the pipeline? Okay, is there 3? Do they actually work in conjunction with the album artwork, or are they kind of standalone visually? Is there a bio, or does there need to be a new bio done? and so on and so forth. And then getting all the links to things like the social medias that they're signed up with, their website, getting all the logins and getting all that kind of stuff sorted. And something important to keep in mind that is, everyone wants to save money wherever humanly possible, of course. But for a lot of these asset inventory things, realistically, you should be trying to use professionals to develop them wherever possible, especially when it comes to things like album artwork and your bio, especially. Like with photos, a lot of people can do trades for photos or graphics and that kind of thing to try to get them cheaper or whatever it is. But honestly, it's worth the investment for the value that it brings to your brand and the legitimacy it brings to your brand too, to have professionals who do this all the time doing it for you. And really, like, it doesn't have to be expensive. You can find people that do it quite cheap or people that are newer at doing it, but you'll get all of the components that you need from it, like getting a logo in a vector file, getting it in the high res and getting it so that you can use it across merch and you don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like the first tip with that, is try to use professionals wherever possible, especially when it comes to something like your bio. I always say, don't write this yourself, please. Everyone can always tell. And you should always have one done kind of at least every album cycle. And like you can update it yourself if something pops up or if you get an award or you get press quotes or whatever it is, but it should be written by a professional, and it doesn't need to be that expensive. Like it can be just like $150, $200, depending on who you get to write it. And actually, Andrew writes bios too. I've used him more than once, so I'm just plugging you there, Andrew.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah. But yeah, making a bio that is specific to you and your release is key, of course, and that works just as importantly as having the right logos and graphics and images and all that kind of stuff done. And logos and graphics are key to be consistent, because it helps like unify when you're doing banners and all that kind of stuff for your social pages and even your artwork and all that kind of stuff. And it's also simultaneously used by promoters and press. So if you have one consistent logo that you're using across everything, it just like immediately raises the bar on all of your platforms. And in terms of images, same thing. Like I've seen it a lot of times where I think, okay, well, on Facebook, I'm going to use this image from this photo shoot, and on Instagram, I'm going to use this. On Twitter, I'm going to use this, and then totally neglecting even any of the other sites updating them. They're just thinking, it's just photos. But realistically, it should be the same lead photo, quote unquote, that's used if you have a release coming out. Because realistically, also, press or people writing about you are going to kind of look you up on whatever platform they want and may just pull a photo from there. So you want to make sure that you're not leading with the wrong photo, or people aren't just grabbing the wrong thing that you don't want them to. You want to have your select image, and you can change it out every couple months too. Yeah, that's kind of like the main thing I look for originally, is like, what assets do you have on hand? And like that can also include, like with an asset inventory, that can also include additional content. Do you have stuff that you've recorded behind the scenes while you were recording? Do you have studio footage? Do you have all that kind of stuff? And again, is it all living up to the quality that you're trying to maintain with your images and your album artwork and everything like that? So it's kind of doing an audit on assets right off the get-go, and then saying, okay, here's the holes we need to fill here. I don't think you have enough content that we can continue this conversation for 6 months. So either we fill that or we shorten the campaign length.
On some of these, or some of the points that you just mentioned, and again, like drawing from your experience, being that you go through this process with each client, we certainly don't need to name names or anything like that, but can you give us some examples of some things that have come up during that asset review? I said brand audit, asset review sounds very nice. But yeah, maybe some specific examples, even from established artists, of things that you found and worked on. Anything stick out in your mind?
Yeah, honestly, the banners issue always seems to be something that comes up for any level of band, like whether it's a new band or an established one. And by banners, I mean kind of the header photos on Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, because there is a lot to think about. There's a lot of, they all have different dimensions and configurations and stuff like that. And people tend to just want to make it as easy as possible so that a banner created. That just
Mhm.
mentions the new album. But say you're doing an album campaign and you're putting out 3 singles and you're announcing a tour and you have a pre-order and then you have an album coming out. You realistically do want to change banners for each of those things, which sounds like overkill, but if you have a great banner that's working optically with the visuals that you have in your album artwork or the visuals you have in your single artwork, or it all ties in together ideally, you switching that out just freshens up your page. And then if you can make it tie back so that, say, when you have a single out, in the corner of the banner, there's still a little pack shot of the album saying album's going to be out blank, blank, blank date. Here's the website link. It just elevates your brand immediately, and it can go stale really quickly if you just leave that same banner. Let's talk about one thing, and a lot of bands tend to put it up for a single, and then the single's been out for 6 months or even 6 weeks, and you've already moved on to something else, but it's that same banner. It just brings it down a notch where it's such an easy fix to have that be something that you change consistently, and it's a talking point as well.
Right. Yeah, I guess related to that, the idea of having like similar imagery, but things that are tailored to different events. That applies to something we were talking about earlier, like with the consistency of your brand across platforms. So the idea that, you know, your logo, photos, imagery, colors, word marks, etc., keeping those consistent, but then tailoring those different assets and resources to different platforms, whether that's your Facebook page, Instagram, homepage. Can you speak a bit about that, about the idea of, like, I guess, maintaining a consistent brand, but also having enough flexibility to tailor the assets and their presentation to these different places they live?
For sure. Yeah, because it's also one of those things, when you're a musician, you want to focus on the music, and your whole goal is getting this album done and thinking about that and thinking about what song you're going to put out first. And of course, that's the focus. But it's never too early to start thinking about what kind of visuals you want to feed through your whole campaign rollout. And again, with your single artwork and your album artwork, your banners, etc. Like if you can have, I hate to call it a theme, but essentially it is a theme
Mhm.
visually that pulls through your single artwork and your album artwork, and even ideally your photos if you're thinking that ahead. um, that's the best case scenario, because that's going to just visually tie everything in together. It's going to make it look so professional. It's going to actually make sense to fans when things roll out. It makes it exciting when things roll out. And then when it comes to creating banners for all platforms, it makes it easier, because then it just visually, like instantly, if someone's looking you up on Instagram, on Facebook, or maybe they saw you on Spotify and then go to try to find you, they'll know based on what they're seeing right up the hop, which is that main profile photo or whatever photo it is. They'll know it's you. They'll know it's not like, oh, I don't know if this is even the right account or not if you don't have a check mark yet. But
Mhm.
it just pulls it all together, and it makes it really obvious, and especially for people like promoters or press, etc. Like it's something you can just do that should be really, really easy, but it's something that you have to think about way ahead of time. And honestly, Good Lovelies are a great example of that, because it was like 6 months before, maybe even longer, before the album release. And even when we were doing the photos, it was that. It was tying in a color scheme, and every single bit of single artwork and album artwork and everything else that came out all had that theme through it, and this kind of like ethereal vibe to it. And it was all by design, and that really did elevate the entire campaign. And we had so many comments on it throughout the whole campaign too.
Mhm. Shapeshifters is the
Yeah.
record, and it's phenomenal. But I guess biased, I did have a small hand in that campaign. But anyway, yeah. So again, we're just kind of setting the stage here for the meat of it to talk about the label services. But yeah, we were just going through your profile, your brand as it exists, and now, of course, you are, I was going to say, drawing people towards your brand. Maybe it's more true that you're pushing your brand out onto the people.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell us a little bit about, yeah, that idea of once you've got all of your assets and whatnot in place. We'll talk about campaigns in a moment, but who are we targeting with these? Who are the people we're going after? What are the methods of engaging with them? And I guess we'll get to quality and quantity shortly, because that was an interesting thing you said earlier. But yeah, building your audience, once you've got the brand in place, how do we start with this?
For sure. And it's really tempting for a lot of artists once you've finished a record to just want to put it out, of course, because you've worked so hard on this thing or even a song. You've worked so hard on this song or thing or event, and you just want to get it out to the masses. And then so you put it up. But something to look at and something to consider is, okay, who are you putting it up to, or who are you pushing this out to? If you've got, social media sites set up that only have a couple hundred fans or followers on them, it's worth putting in a little bit of extra time if you can to try to build up that audience more. And that's easier said than done when you have some older music already out, because then you can kind of use some of those older assets, I'll call them, even, but songs or music, some kind of way to gain traction with a fan base and build up a fan base to actually release new things too. Because otherwise, you can still put it out, but you're releasing to that small group of people, and you're going to spend a lot more money trying to get new fans on board that may not necessarily be interested. So, I mean, methods of engagement, if you actually have established a bit of an audience, or you know that you have some audience that you can be releasing to, is, consistent posting, number one, when it comes to social platforms. And then when it comes to things like Twitter, it is engaging with fans. It's talking to people. It's answering questions. It's answering the direct messages. Like, it really is engaging with your fan base. It's a huge, important part of social media these days and marketing. And then, a lot of people start talking about, and a lot of things that we do are digital advertising. And that's something that kind of runs into that quality versus quantity conversation, because with digital ads, it's like it looks really easy and it can be really easy on things like Facebook. You're like, well, I'm just going to boost this post. And then people go, okay, well, I'm going to boost it. I'm going to put $50 and I'm going to boost it to Canada and for people anywhere between 18 and 65 years old. And all you're doing there is essentially just throwing money at the wall, and you may get amazing results in terms of your impressions. And then you go to look and you go, oh my God, like only 5 people actually clicked on this link, and I've spent $50, and that's like a $10 click-through rate, which is really high. But optically, you're like, you may be happy because you're going, but I reached 20,000 people. But that doesn't mean anything if those people did not turn into new fans, or they didn't turn into someone that's going to be someone that you can essentially sell to, or get to stream your music, or get to be coming out to a show. Like, so, all the social platforms give you this amazing tool on the back end of them to look at your insights and look at exactly who is responding to your page, where they live, what their age is, even what time they're online. And it's usually just under a button that says insights on any of those platforms. But it's worth sitting down and spending time and going, okay, on Facebook, I tend to have an audience, and this is true for most people. The audience tends to skew a bit older because, like, the younger generations aren't really going on Facebook as much. So going through your insights, you're going, okay, on Facebook, my audience is 25 to 45-year-old females. Here's my cities that seem to be responding well. And then thinking about, are you going to be touring in those cities? Okay, I'll boost to those cities. Or if you're going, hey, I still want to build up an audience in Montreal, even though it's not responding well there, just knowing that's your goal. And targeting your spends and even behaviors. If you're thinking about, okay, I'm in a band that's maybe I'm a jazz artist. So I'm not going to be targeting people who are into punk rock. I'm not going to be targeting people that are into this, that. You can get that kind of specific in the back end of targeting ads. It's just a matter of spending a lot of time to learn who your audience is. And then so you may have a way smaller impression rate because you're catering your ads and you're catering your marketing to such a smaller pool of people. And that's not a bad thing, because you're going to get more meaningful engagement out of it. And, I say this to people all the time, like when I run ads to promote videos for people, they go, oh, well, my goal here in this campaign is to have 1 million views on the video. It's like, okay, but why? It's always a big question, why? Because optically it looks cool, but then, I mean, you go to see the comments and there's not a lot of comments there. Or is it because you just think that that means that you've hit a milestone if you get to 1 million? No. I'd rather have there be 10,000 views if each of those 10,000 people are people that go, wow, I'm so glad to have discovered this band. I'm going to go to the next show when they're in my city, et cetera, et cetera. And it's in a territory or somewhere that you've geo-targeted that you actually will be going to, and it matters. So when you think of spending money, don't just think of like boosting and getting views and getting maybe a couple likes out of it. Think about what your actual goals are. Like, do you want to grow your audience, or do you want to, you know, put bums in seats because you plan on touring a lot? Or do you want there to be a lot of comments and shares? Or like, what is your overall goal with each boost and bit of money you spend? And then how do you get that based on your target audience? So, sorry, I'm like rambling on about that, but it is a really easy thing to find that information. Even on streaming sites, same thing. People don't realize that on sites like Apple Music and Spotify, you should be going in there and updating it just as often. Well, not just as often, but around an album cycle, just like you should a social media site. Like your main artist photo in Spotify, you can put tour dates, that kind of thing, and keeping that updated. And then looking at the back end analytics of there, like who's responding, what cities, does that match up with any of your platforms? And you can see what's kind of driving numbers to there too, depending on the kind of ads you run. So it all works together, and it is a lot of information, but it's worth the deep dive before you start throwing money at the wall to promote your release or your event.
I know that there are a lot of variables that go into this, so if there's no good answer, just tell me. But in your experience, coming at it from two angles, from the analytics side and how detailed you can get with like your data, but also just on the general kind of return on investment for what you're looking for as a music marketer. But on both of those things, are there platforms that you found that are better or at least more conducive to this type of marketing than others? And if so, can you enlighten us?
Like in terms of finding the analytics, or in terms of like advertising?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean in terms of like the analytics that are available to you, where an investment on this platform makes a lot of sense just for how effectively you can target people and how rich the data is that comes back to you, like how practical what you can find out might be.
Oh, I see. Yeah, like it does depend on completely on what you're doing, like on what you're putting out and what your goals are. Because I find honestly my favorite ad platform that gives you so much information is Google AdWords. And what you can do through Google AdWords is even do something like with a teeny budget, like $20, you can run things called split tests. And I think you can actually do it on Facebook as well. And you just run essentially a sample test of two completely different audiences, wait till it's done, and then it tells you exactly the kind of people who care. And they'll actually, if you run it on a bigger campaign, they'll actually just stop the other one if it's not responding well and be like, here you go, here's your winner, use this. So like those platforms, they knew that there was a lot of websites coming out, like things like Sprout Social and stuff that were giving you analytics. And so all the big social media sites just essentially changed their back-end analytics to be better anyways. So you don't really need to find another website or anything to kind of collect that data for you. You can really get that from doing a deep dive in the back end of your Google AdWords or your Facebook. But the thing with Facebook is that just gives you your information, whereas something like Google AdWords, you have to run a couple ads and then it builds your audience up. So it is, again, another thing where you're spending a bit of time on doing it, but Google AdWords gives you like such a wash of information. It's crazy, like way more than Facebook, way more than Instagram Insights. Like it'll give you teeny tiny details about people. It's actually relatively creepy with the level of detail they can give you. But I love it. That's my favorite platform to run ads on because the engagement is great and you can really get down to the nitty gritty of exactly who's seeing your ads.
One more before we get to our first, or I guess only question break. But yes, feel free to submit on the chat side here. But with regards to that, and say like keeping it to maybe the 5 or 6 big Facebook, Google, I guess all the ones that you've named so far. but like, how much for someone to want to take this on themselves? How much? Maybe that's an unfair question. How much time would it? Because how steep is the learning curve to figure out how these platforms work and to really dig in and I guess kind of understand how you can capitalize on these tools? Is this something that people realistically can do on their own? Or speaking with the bias of someone that offers these services, do you recommend like that maybe this is a place where you're better to just hand over a bit of money and let someone take care of it that has dedicated their career to this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard question because it's on what you want to do. Like anyone can do boosts on Facebook and that kind of stuff. Like use those kind of easier promotions on social sites.
Hmm.
And you can spend a couple hours learning the back end and a couple hours looking at your audience, and then try things out here and there, and then get it pretty good. And it happens all the time. And I even have clients that at the end of working together, they say, "Hey, can I just sit down with you for an hour or two and go through these platforms, and you can kind of show me some tips and tricks and stuff like that, how to run ads." But if you're getting into things like you want to launch a whole campaign of digital ads that are like on all platforms, Google AdWords, and it's not just Google AdWords boosting a video, but like you want banner ads, you want to be placed on websites, you want to be this. It is a pretty steep learning curve, and they change the platform constantly. That's not to say
Hmm.
that you can't, there's YouTube videos out there explaining it, there's online courses you can take, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of the times when people come to me, they're ready to release. They don't have a month to sit down and go, okay, I'm going to start learning this. I'm going to start like setting aside an hour a day to learn this. So it is a matter of if you have the time and the foresight for it, and you can go, okay, I'm releasing my first single in 3 months. I'm going to spend the next month really learning how to advertise and kind of do a couple tests and start building a small core audience up now, so I know exactly what I'm doing when I put it out. Then by all means, like there are ways to learn, but it's just a matter of also your attention span and how much you want to spend on it, because it is a lot of time, especially Google AdWords. Like I think over time it's just gotten more and more and more in depth, which is a great thing, but just more complicated.
Okay. All right. Some questions coming in here. The chat's been active. Thank you, folks, for, by the way, this is the first time we've kept the chat public. Wanted to see how it would go, and so far so good. Someone had some technical difficulties. Thank you to everyone else that tried to help them out. Hopefully the audio is working for everybody that hasn't reported anything. Someone was having trouble. Anyway, you can fire some questions at us. And I guess the one I had pertains to our next slide here, so we can just keep rolling. If you've got a question, if it's pertinent to something that we've already touched on, just jump into the middle of the presentation. Otherwise, we'll take a longer Q&A at the end. But yeah, I don't want you to ask you to disclose dollars and cents or anything like that. But just generally speaking, and I guess we'll do it in the context of endemic marketing. But say somebody comes to you, album release campaign, wants to take advantage of, say, the majority of your core services and maybe needs a couple of things farmed out. Like just general ballpark even, what are we talking about in terms of an investment to do this effectively? Like a couple $1,000? Does it get into five figures?
Yeah, like that's a tough one, because it's like obviously if you are able to set aside like however much you're able to set aside is amazing, and if you can set aside a couple $1,000s around a single, that's a really amazing for a digital campaign. Um, but honestly, like even if you only had a couple hundred, like I just had a client came to me and did a solo album, and she's usually part of a bigger group, but she just wanted to put it out and do a little teeny tour, and she had like literally, I think it was maybe $700 for the entire 2 song single release and then the album release. And that was like the whole digital campaign budget of ad spends. It still did well, you know what I mean? Like it still was something that was useful and required, really, which is kind of unfortunate that like to tread through the masses now you have to spend money on socials. But it just kind of has to be. But again, it was done properly and targeted the markets that she was hitting on this little tour, and really a really core base of people, and the response was good, and she had good streaming numbers, she had good um, kind of physical sales. She just did a little one off her website. So like again, her goals were not lofty. They weren't, I want this to be millions of streams and this and that and unrealistic based on budget. I guess that's kind of the bigger part of it is does your campaign spend match your budget? And sorry, not your budget, your goals.
Right.
And does it make sense? You know what I mean? You can't spend $200 and think you're going to get that in front of the eyes of millions. But whatever you can do to rally and save money up for advertising, you will get that back. Especially because it's like, if you're someone that's somewhat established and you've hit that threshold on YouTube of subscribers where you can start making ad dollars, if you start promoting videos and getting eyes on them, you're going to get some of that back. Same with Spotify. If you're driving people to Spotify and you start getting streams up, you get some of those numbers up and you get revenue back and royalty numbers back. Same with when you're hiring third-party team members, if you can start getting, CBC radio play or Sirius XM play, that's good money back in royalties. You don't see it right away, so it's kind of hard to make it a tangible thing, but all these things come back, and it's not just quantified by album sales. It's overall, if you're filling a room with people and you didn't do that before and you're getting a door deal or whatever it is, and you start getting more shows booked, all those things are dollars in your pocket as a result of properly done advertising. So I didn't answer your question at all, essentially. But yeah, like if you can save whatever you can, but I mean, you can do stuff with any budget, but the more you have, the more it'll reach.
Fair enough. Great question, Carmen. We'll get to that shortly. And Mark, online training course, what specifically are you after? If you give us a bit more info, we'll put that one in front of Tyler in a moment. So yeah, some of the different campaigns here, and Tyler, maybe you can help throw some more in the basket, but I mean, there's obvious music release, whether that's an album, an EP, a single. I have a show, I guess more frequently it would be a full tour. And then for special initiative or event, yeah, I was thinking of like charity campaigns or maybe contests or events that someone might be doing in order to make some waves, get people's attention. Are there other types of campaigns that you've serviced or that should at least be considering?
Yeah, sometimes I've done a couple of video campaigns. So if someone, is doing a really, really big video and maybe it didn't line up exactly with the single release or the album release, but they want this video to make a splash and they know it's a big part of their campaign and they kind of were comfortable doing some advertising on their own around the rest of the release, but this video they want to make a splash. I've done a couple of those where it's video specific, just Google AdWords, just like driving that video to the most important people and not just getting the numbers up, but again, to those relevant people that you want it to, and then having that kind of spearhead the rest of the campaign. And yeah, same thing with events. Like even when you said special initiative or event, sometimes people can't tour around a release, but they'll do a CD release show. You know what I mean? That's a good example of like an event that needs to go really well, and that'll cross promote your release or your single. So those are a lot of things that I work to.
Yeah. I know that this one will change a lot based on the type of campaign, your budget, etc. But maybe you can shine some light on your process. Again, if you're sitting down with a new client, the idea of setting not just goals, but realistic goals around their campaign. What does that process look like? What are some of the things that you're encouraging people to consider and examine with that?
Yeah, I think for me, the key thing is to steer away from having this idea in your head that you have to sell a lot of physical product or digital product for you to have a successful campaign. Like that, numbers like that are the thing that tell you that you've been successful. And I mean, for anyone that's done grants, you'll even see that a lot of these grant companies are shying away from just saying, oh, this is album-based qualifications to get this. Everything kind of comes into play. You can have syncs, you can have streaming numbers, you can have this, that. Like there's a lot of things that quantify your success. And again, it's also very specific to people. And that's kind of the important thing. If you're someone that's saying, okay, I'm at this level, I've only ever played locally, the question is, okay, so what are your goals for your career, really? It's not just like for this album, but as a result of this album, do you want to be getting more show offers? Do you want to be touring outside of your city? Do you want to be touring outside of your province? And do you want to appeal to bigger bands to take you on the road with them, maybe?
Right.
Because that's a big one. And like if you suddenly elevate your album image, your package going as a support band out to other bands looks really good, and you have your stuff there. And if you can show that you're doing advertising and you're doing the work behind it, you're more likely to be taken out on the road. So is it touring that you want to be enhanced through this album or single release? Is this just a vessel to get you on tour? Or, yeah, do you want to be growing your Spotify numbers? Do you want to be growing your Apple Music numbers? Do you want to be more involved in streaming platforms, get featured on playlists? Or is maybe playlisting isn't important to you at all? Maybe you want to be played on radio. Maybe you don't care if it's commercial or indie or campus. Or maybe you do care. Maybe your big goal is to be played on commercial radio. So there's all these different things to be thought about. And it can never just be, well, I want this album to sell well. It needs to be, okay, realistically, you're here. How do we get you up those next steps? Because it's always like, you always have to be thinking 10 steps ahead. Because what happens after the album? Do you just go away and then you start from scratch again? Or are you already writing new music? Is that when you go into tour and then from there, you've got maybe a feature on someone else's album, and then from there you have another single coming out in between albums or something like that. So it's always, thinking 10 steps ahead, thinking where you want to be in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, and how do we bridge that gap with marketing around this album and use this album or single or event to help be a stepping stone to get you there. Like maybe it's even just a matter of you want this album to be out so you have something to drive up your social numbers. Like it'd be something that easy, but you need to know that for yourself, or even just be willing to think about it and talk about it openly and figure those goals out with me, essentially.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that actually, that your goals don't even have to be ends in themselves, but could just be means to other means to other ends and so on.
Totally. Yeah, because I mean, in a day and age where artists don't make money off record sales, realistically, most artists, for a lot of people, albums are excuses to tour. You know what I mean? So I get that a lot. And it's for a lot of people, the goal is to extend the life of their touring cycle even, you know what I mean? And make sure that you're using these album assets to appeal to new fans to get those people at your shows. Like that's the main goal, is get people to the shows. And I see that all the time. So it's worth thinking about what your overall goals are, and then it doesn't sound like a marketing person's job, but maybe that's just because I've been in management roles before, and it's that plotting those steps of how to get from here to here and everything in between, and how do we fill those gaps to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. There's a few great questions in the queue that maybe you've seen, but if you haven't, try to resist looking, Tyler. I want to put them in real time. All right, so here we go. No label required. So again, the core service at Endemic, there are many core services at Endemic. The idea, though, being that, you are helping artists find and or solicit the services that they need for their particular project, for their particular campaign, offering some guidance along the way, and then ultimately, a la carte, you get what you need, you pay a one-time fee for the work, and then you don't have any hands in your pockets going forward. You keep all of your earnings from that point. So with that in mind, and again, trying to empower people to know that they can either do some of this themselves or at least know how to go about getting help with it, where they're not beholden to anybody else. I've got a short list of services that a record label would typically provide or source themselves, all of which I know that you either offer or can farm out to some trusted collaborators. I'm sure there are some on my list here that we haven't touched on. We'll just pretend that everybody has a general idea of what publicity, radio tracking is, etc. Can you walk us through and maybe just give us an idea as to how important these things are, which type of campaign they might pertain to, maybe situations where you don't necessarily need to consider radio track? Geez, I realize I'm casting a really wide net here.
Yeah.
Can you help us zoom in a bit and just walk through some of the different services that you're offering. And again, maybe if you're sitting down with a new client, how you would guide them into what they should be looking at and what they might not need.
For sure. Like if we do the asset inventory type of thing and go, okay, if you're starting from zero, obviously you need people like photographers, designers, website development, that kind of thing. You need all of those people. And we don't do it in-house, namely because like I have done some of those things in-house, but it'll be specific to the artist, of course. Like I'm never going to push one photographer on everyone. That's one of those things that, and even with designers and web developers, you have to really mesh with the person that's going to be doing that for you. But opening that up and going, okay, here's a bunch of options we work with. Here's what we've kind of come up with from before. Does this work for you? Let's get some quotes. Let's get some that kind of stuff together. That's kind of how we approach it. But those asset inventory things from the beginning of this presentation, those are kind of the core starting point of what you need. And then when it comes to things like publicity, I always get asked the question, if we have some money, say from grants or whatever it may be, we've kind of scraped together some money. We can only afford to hire one team member out of marketing, publicity, radio tracking, etc. Who do we hire? I actually always say publicity, even though we don't technically do publicity, because a publicist can, like, that's a great way of getting your overall optics up by getting reviews and getting, a good publicist will get you on things like CBC if that's the kind of audience that your music works for, or on satellite radio, and in campus, and do blogs and do press. So they kind of are that first way of getting your music out to the masses, and in a way that you can pull quotes from, you can kind of brag about it, you can kind of get tangible results from that you can use into your next phase of release. And, while hitting a bit of extra audience, if you have to run the rest of the stuff like ads and stuff like that yourself, just to be budget conscious. But radio tracking is usually pretty far down the line. And again, you have to know that your music is viable for commercial radio because it's really expensive. Like a radio tracking campaign can start for one single anywhere from $3,500 to $7,000, and there's zero guarantee that it'll do anything for you.
Right.
So it has to be a thing that, like, and you know that you're going to someone that you trust, that's genuinely telling you, we believe in this track and we think we can get this on radio for you. And they usually won't work stuff. If they're a good radio tracker, they won't work stuff unless you do have braggable streaming numbers and you do have a good amount of fans and stuff on social media, and you do have a lot of buzz going around you, because they need that to go to any of the PDs at radio stations and try to sell the song to them, essentially. So that is pretty far down the line. But if you're in that realm and that's your goal, then, it's something to work up to, but it's never right off the hop ever. And if someone's going to take your money to do it, it's probably not a good radio tracker. And same with publishing licensing. Like I have a client who is signed to Universal Canada, Universal US, Virgin UK, Virgin in a bunch of different countries, like a bunch of different international labels, but he's just holding back his publishing because every deal that's come across the table, it's kind of like, well, I'm giving away half the farm right off the hop, and I haven't even hit my full potential yet, and this is income that I really could use as a result of other things going on. So I'm just going to wait till I've got established, 4, 5, 6 songs under my belt, or even a couple albums, and then start shopping it because I know the value's there. Because it's like publishing deals look so appealing right off the get-go because it's like, oh, someone's going to do all this stuff for you and hopefully pitch you for syncs and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, realistically, you are giving up, if you're doing a co-pub deal, you're giving up half your income from publishing. And if someone's coming in early, it's probably because they know there's something there that's an easy sell. So, if you do some of the legwork yourself and you go to some of these people like an Instinct Entertainment that love to deal with people that just own their own publishing to place your music into indie films, stuff like that, like it's better to just build it on your own and then wait till you have this catalog that has this value to kind of pitch to publishers that are going to really work for you instead of just adding it to a collection and collecting off of you.
I want to jump in there about your client that you mentioned that's signed a bunch of places, but that's kept his publishing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking no label required here, but is it the case these days, especially with the tools available to artists and I guess the power balance being a lot more even, that there are more instances where people are taking record deals, but then maybe throwing their weight a little around, throwing more weight around in terms of how those take shape and what they're yielding or handing over? Like,
Yeah.
can you give examples where like people are signed to a label, but you know, it's not the traditional pre-disruption kind of all eggs in one basket kind of deal?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, because we're on a no label required slide, and I just mentioned that I work for someone that's signed to labels.
Yeah.
But in his case, and in a lot of cases when I deal with some clients, even help them with like contract negotiations, um, they sign, and a lot of labels are looking for this nowadays too, just single deals, or they'll sign on just for the life cycle of one album over a set amount of years, ideally a short set amount of years. So when I work with clients like that, they're already looking ahead to 2, 3 years from now. And they're going, okay, well, I'm still writing, I'm still doing this, I'm still doing that. I already know, like, as soon as I'm out of this deal, like, I'm grateful for all the help the labels give me or whatever. But realistically, I'm looking ahead. And if this does well with this, I don't need a label anymore. So I'm already looking ahead, and I'm not tied to them because essentially the label is taking like 99% of the income off of this current album. So I have to be looking ahead to when I'm going to own the masters on my next one and what I can do with that to jump off of this point. Um, and even just keeping in mind that, depending on the deal you sign with a label, they won't help you all the time with things like social media. They won't help you with touring. They won't help you with this, that, depending on the deal and depending on their level of investment. Or simultaneous with that same client that I work with, it's like when you have a label that's doing publicity and design and all that kind of stuff for you, you're still getting charged that. It's just going in the back end of your account and it's going as a recoupable cost, so you have to pay it back either from album sales and streaming and stuff like that. So you won't see a dollar from your release until those things are recouped. So with this client, it's like, okay, well, we actually choose that we want to use our own videographers and not leave it up to you guys to do the videos because we don't want $100,000 video. Like, we know we have guys that can do it for this, and we don't want to have to be indebted to you for your choice of video people at your budget. So we're going to pull these things back into our own court and do them ourselves. So there is the choice, and like, you're lucky if you have the choice, because a lot of people, you get given a record deal and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing, I'm just going to say yes. But having the creative control is such a important part of it. It's not even just giving up your income and that kind of stuff, but it's really like, you as a person, are you okay with someone else calling all the shots, and then they could be wrong and you don't have success either way, but you've given up everything that you know about your music and your brand and your identity. So if you have the ability to negotiate these things, you should. And if you don't, and it's really important to you and you get offered a label deal, you have to really heavily consider if it's worth it. Because the scary part is always, of course, upfront costs. But, at the end of the day, if you know you're being kind of ding that in the back end of the label anyways, or if you know you can budget well and get grants and get funding and get help, and then have your set goals and have your things to work towards and know where there's income coming in, it's worth it to retain it yourself and just do it yourself.
Right on. I had a couple of questions on these notes, although, again, it looks like some of the people in the audience have been reading my mind. There's some great ones here. Okay, so the one I wanted to start with, yes, Jennifer, great question I wanted to ask myself. Outside of Facebook, she's asking, is there a website that's got a list of resources, or I think like basically like a freelance market where you can get in touch with different service providers, and yeah, that's a trustworthy, easy to use platform. Anything that you can recommend?
What's funny is where I see that Jennifer specifically talked about album covers and logos too. Where
Yeah.
I found one of my favorite people now to work with, and she, like, I literally refer to everyone. She's so amazing, and she can do any kind of like look and feel, and she's so affordable too. Is I found her from looking through the Juno nominees for artwork, and I just literally sleuthed through that from a couple of years of who was nominated for best album artwork, and then kind of looked them up online, and pulled contacts from there, and I liked hers the most, and she got back, and she's amazing. Her name's Roberta Landreth. But that it's just that kind of stuff. Like it's that's how I've kind of tapped into a lot of people, is either word of mouth, of course, like asking publicists I know or artists I know or anything like that who they would recommend, and I've just kind of built a laundry list over 10 years of these people. Or yeah, using resources of people that have like been nominated for things that they've done, especially with Junos. It's like, of course they're so great, and you can see right there on the nomination like what they've been nominated for, and kind of creep them that way. And I was surprised with how affordable she was. And now she's become someone that I use literally all the time for everything I can.
I'll say I've never used it. I can't endorse it firsthand, although I have had people tell me that they've had good luck on Fiverr
Oh,
getting
really?
some small projects done.
Why
Music
not?
Directory Canada too. Music Directory Canada, there are some designers and folks on there you can find. Hopefully that helps, Jennifer. Here's another great one. Carmen asks, what if you already released a 6-song EP, she specifically says online, about a year ago, and you still want to leverage it? I guess, yeah, if you think that there's still life in a project, maybe the campaign wasn't as focused as you think it can be. If you're sitting on good material that you know hasn't really been pushed out properly, is there such a thing as kind of a mid-cycle refresher course, or what would you advise?
Yeah, I guess it depends on how it was released to. Like, if say it was just literally put up on something like CD Baby or something like that, there's no reason why you can't essentially re-release it. And maybe I'm doing it properly if CD Baby kind of did it haphazardly. But doing something like through TuneCore, doing this, making sure it's up on all the platforms or what have you. And I get that question a lot, like, should I pull down old music and then put it up again if I didn't release it properly? But there's ways to still breathe life back into it. Like, you can just do features, which I've done with people before, where it's like, hey, we're looking back to last year, we're going to feature a song a month from our first EP, and we're going to put some visuals to it, and like that can be done really affordably, like just with like, making single artwork for each song and then making it move kind of graphically a little bit in a video, and having those all kind of work together visually, doing something neat like that in a campaign, and just calling it like, featuring it, or a look back or something like that. There's always ways to creatively breathe life back into something that you've done before that maybe you didn't have the budget then, but you do now. And that's still a good way to build up some fan base, because you don't always have new material right away, but you want to be setting up for new material. So why not look back on some older releases and then put a little bit of budget behind promoting them?
Oh, right on. I'll just read this one word for word. Andrew asks, as a brand new band still in the writing phase, at what point would you recommend beginning the process of promoting, even as far as starting to solicit fans and posting content on social media? And how do you effectively promote when you don't actually have any music out yet, or no release date, assuming you have pick spot? Okay, let me try to distill this once more. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So if there's an artist that's in the writing phase, getting music together, getting their brand identity together, any advice as to when you advise they pull the trigger, or is it kind of the matter where it's like, okay, let's just pick a date and then work towards getting everything ready for that? Cart before the horse?
No, I think like if you are literally starting from zero, I mean, there is something to be said for setting up your social pages and inviting people that know you to them, just to get it started. You know what I mean? Like inviting friends and family and that kind of thing, just to get yourself off the ground. And then whatever you can do in terms of content from behind the scenes, like I probably wouldn't do it from the writing phase, but the studio phase for sure. Because then you can get little snippets here and there, like of board mixes and stuff like that, but with video, of music that's coming, and get people excited with that. And I would say probably, I mean, if you're just literally, this is the first thing you're ever putting out, I would say maybe 6 weeks before you plan on putting out your first song is a good time to not burn out. And this is one of those cases where, and I do this a lot with some of the indie bands I work with. So sometimes you do want to put out the album first, and then again start highlighting or featuring tracks after the fact. and then driving people back because you didn't, like, there wasn't really a way to build a huge audience before putting music out. So, you know, putting some behind the scenes stuff to cater those people that know you, maybe that know you as a musician, maybe you're in another band before, or something like that, like building up your friends and family audience, starting to leak out a little bit of material. Maybe if you were able to get some kind of cool 15 or 30-second clips from the board that have good, high quality video that go with them, you can start running a little bit of ads to get people curious and draw some new fans in, but it wouldn't be like crazy numbers, but you could get it up in the hundreds, ideally. And then from there, you have a release out, and then you can start featuring new songs, new that kind of stuff. Maybe, again, rolling out a song every couple of weeks or every month, and then leading into your album, or doing it the reverse even.
All right.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be doing it when it's like 6 months before, and then you have the same 3 things to talk about that don't actually have music to them, and then it is that it just starts getting annoying and burning you out.
All right. Yeah, I guess we'll cap it there. If anyone has any additional questions or they come later on as you're sleeping tonight, aking, I am AKING at nwcworld.com. Send them my way. I will put them in front of Tyler if it's something that is beyond my knowledge. Very well may be the case. But yeah, we want to get you answers now or in the future. Recording of this session will hit your inbox in the next 24 hours as well, so you can go back, feel free to share as you see fit. Musicbooksplus.com, our sister company, I've got a few titles here, I guess, related to some of the things we talked about today. If you use the coupon code webinars at Music Books Plus, you'll save 10%. There, both Andrew and Carmen, direct thank yous, Tyler, for your expertise. And yeah, I mentioned you'll get the recording. nwcwebinars.com, though, is where you can go to check out our trove of all of the previous sessions. As a matter of fact, I want to make sure I'm not lying here. Yeah, outside of our staff, Tyler is the first repeat co-presenter we've had. What an honor.
Oh, yay.
We're thrilled that you took the time. So yeah, you can check out Tyler's first webinar from a couple years ago. It's there with all of our previous sessions, all totally free. Our next one will be with Teresa Cirillo, but keeping your voice healthy. We'll have registration up for that tomorrow. I think that's all of our housekeeping notes. Yeah, appreciate your attention, Tyler. It was very, very, very good having you in the hot seat. Thank you so much for your time and input.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and thanks for dealing with me being super out of breath sounding. I am almost 9 months pregnant at the moment, so I don't have a lot of lung capacity left to me.
I wasn't going to say it if you didn't, but I'm pretty giddy for my friend Tyler. So there you go. Maybe we'll update you on that when the time comes. Anyway, we are signing off here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tyler. nwcwebinars.com. I'm Andrew King, and we're signing off.